What is going on, Nuggets Nation NBA fans? My name is Tom Leuthner. Welcome back to Nuggets Today, presented by Fan Arts. Like I said, this is now the episode after Game 2 of the preseason, and I think I want to get to some certain points. The first point being Deron Holmes, and I think that Holmes is a guy who now we've seen in Summer League, we've seen him a little bit in the preseason, and I just think it's time to experiment, and I think this preseason is the time to do these kinds of experiments and see where people fit and where people don't fit. And I think that it's really personally time to see Deron Holmes with that first unit if we can. AG misses a game. I don't think that the preseason is the biggest morale boost for certain guys. I think maybe for some guys, younger guys who want to get an opportunity, it is. But for guys who are already proven, like Jokic, even Val to a certain extent, he's playing lazy. And I think that, you could sort of tell that he doesn't, not that he doesn't care necessarily, but that he doesn't want to put in 100% effort. And I get it because people also don't want to get hurt. I mean, you have a team like the Grizzlies who just lost three or four starters. A team like the Mavs just lost a few starters. So you don't want to risk anything too much, but I also think it's time to see how a guy like Deron Holmes would mesh with this first unit, even if you're only starting him and playing him 15 minutes, but let him get those 15 minutes with that first five. I think that, if a guy like AG is going to miss a game, instead of putting Watson in there, who I was happy to see Watson, and how he played. I'm going to get to him in a little bit, but I think that's when you want to see a guy like Deron get those kinds of minutes. You want to see Deron go out there and see if he can hoop with that first unit. And I think that he's a good enough player to be a factor for Denver this year. So I think that we sort of need to see more of him right now. I think that he needs way more minutes than he's getting. He shouldn't be in the same minute restriction as guys like Moses and Kessler Edwards who are fighting to be on the team, in my opinion. He should be in the minute range of guys like Hunter Tyson, Pickett, Val, Najee. I know he is around there, I guess, but more on the Val level than anything. And I think that, like I said, I think he could be a good rotational guy for Denver. I think that it just comes down to him meshing with that first unit and actually being able to play with that first unit and being able to play at such a high level where Denver's confident enough to put him in because he's capable enough to do it, which I think he is. And I think that, even if he's in that second unit with Val and him playing the 4, Val at the 5, I think that would be massive for them just because you have a guy like Deron who can shoot around a guy like Val who seems to be nothing but a backup playmaker for Denver at the 5. So, like I said, I think that this, he deserves more than what he's getting right now. And I think it's unfortunate that he's only getting a few minutes per game. But what he's showing is promising. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is something that he was showing. A guy like Kessler Edwards really showed it. The entire starting 5, I think, the second game showed it, and so did the bench unit. They were way more aggressive this game than they were the first game. I think that the first game, the defense looked terrible. This game, the offense looked worse, but I want to say the aggressiveness on defense looked way better. I mean, you look at how they started the game, and I mean, Cam Johnson picked up 2 easy, quick fouls, but at the same time, listen, he was playing tough. He's going up. He wasn't scared to use his body. He was sort of hand checking here and there. And it wasn't just him. Bruce wasn't scared to use his body on defense. CB wasn't scared to use his body on defense. You saw Val playing a more physical game. Val was almost treating the Raptors defenders like babies, which is it's disrespectful, but it was funny because he's such a big guy that anytime he got in the post, he was sort of just, Jordan palming the ball and, playing his own game. But he's such a massive body that it's going to take an entire shot clock just to stop a guy like that. So he was playing aggressive on offense. Like I said, Cam and CB obviously were the 2 most aggressive in the first 5. And the thing with, you see CB setting these, I don't want to say dirty screens, but there were some physical screens. I know he got called once for an illegal screen, but he's laying guys out. He's a shooting guard. It's great to see that, but he also is hustling on defense. He looks great, and he was also immaculate from the field. So I know that high praise to CB. But like I said, he's a guy who is able to play at a physical level, and you sort of want him to express that role. Same thing with Aaron Gordon. I think that their offense is good enough for those kinds of guys to express that role and to be a physical presence on defense. And I think that's what I want to talk about with this next guy as well. Payne Watson, a guy who's really been proven, and he continues to prove himself. All you've heard is high praise, especially from DA, and DA was continued to praise him last game. He looks way more confident. there are some interesting possessions that I was watching in the second game where Cam Johnson would get a rebound, or, whatever the case may be, CB gets a rebound. And when they're bringing it up the court, because P-Watt was in that first five, they were giving Peyton Watson the ball to dribble, which I thought was, like I said, it's a time for players to develop and sort of learn their own game. And to see a guy like Watson, who anytime he was on a fast break would fumble the ball and struggle, or anytime they were trusting him to dribble, he sort of, not that he always turned it over, but he sort of looked a little lackadaisical with the ball. Being a ball handler for Denver is intriguing, because you have a guy who's a bigger body. You're looking for somebody who could handle the ball, whether that be in the first unit or the second unit. And he just looks so much better offensively. He looks so much more, defined or refined, I guess, that he could crack the starting five in games. And I'm not nervous with him being out on the floor. I think last year it almost felt like he was a liability from the three-point line or the offensive game in general. The one thing I do want to see more of from Peyton Watson is finishing over smaller defenders, realistically, right? I was watching I think it was only one play last game, but him getting the ball, going up for a little floater, and he alligator-armed it over a defender that's nowhere close to his height. That bothers me, because if you're going to be one of those guys who's a point forward, or even a guard forward combo, you have to be able to finish those kinds of things for a team like Denver to rely on you. They have guys who can go out there and score the ball. You have Strother, you have Tim Hardaway, even Bruce can go out and score if you need him to. Deron Holmes is there. If Peyton Watson can't go out there and be able to score over a smaller defender, then it's a problem. And I think that was one thing that last year was the problem, is him just not being able to finish, whether it's on a fast break or just around the rim. So I think he needs to continue to work on that aspect of his game, and maybe a little bit more on shooting, even though he looks a lot better from the three-point line. So I think all the high praise was well deserved for Peyton Watson. I'm excited to see what he can bring to Denver for the season. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the same topic that I got into last episode, just because there's so much going on. So this is just a little look around the league. The first thing I want to bring up is Ousmane Dieng, I think is how you say his last name, from OKC. Whatever he did in the offseason looks great. I mean, he's moving around, not necessarily to the exact T, but he's moving around like Kevin Durant. He looks like a big body who's, I believe he's like 6'9", 6'10", and he was able to move off the dribble. His handle looked great. He looked shifty. So that makes me a little nervous, because he's a guy who can come in for OKC and fully change the pace from that 4 or 5 man spot. So, like I said, I think that's a little nerve-wracking. The Spurs had Cornette look amazing. I think he shot 100% from the field as well. But they also had two guys on the team they were playing against, which I believe was a Chinese team, dominate, and that is Frank Kaminsky and Victor Oladipo, which it's great to see two guys who are former NBA players, especially Oladipo, who, in his prime was something special, man. Come back to the NBA and be able to dominate in games like that. You love to see it. I believe it was Jimmer Fredette who did the same thing a couple of years ago. He came back and, fully dominated. So it's good to see that. They both played very well. And then you have the Mavs. The Mavs look special. They just signed Delano Banton as well. And the Cooper Flag block to the AD lob. It makes me nervous as a Nuggets fan, because I just genuinely think that they could be such a good team this upcoming year, and they do scare me. I think that they're one of the scariest teams in my opinion. But that's all I got for you guys today, Nuggets Nation. Like I said, I'll have another episode out for you guys tomorrow, and I'm excited. I'm really excited for this season, the upcoming season. And I think that Denver has something special, and I think that they just got to figure it all out. But this is the time for, us as fans to learn what everybody's about, and I guess the entire organization to learn what all the players are about. So, like I said, I'm very excited, but hit that like and subscribe button. I will catch you guys next episode.